Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, and I am joined today by a very interesting guest. This is going to be all about how to grow your practice through writing books and becoming an authority marketing expert. Today I have Paul McManus on. Paul, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. For those of you that are new to the show and maybe just listening on your, through iTunes or whatever, don't forget we have a YouTube channel. So it's Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa, and you can see us, two handsome fellas on video, and just maybe you have a few chuckles. But anyway, for those of you that have joined us and have been joining us and sending in reviews and sending in ideas, we appreciate it. Don't forget, we also post these on our Instagram account, which is franklarosa.elite, so we can check them out there. So for my audience, I try to bring on guests that I feel are going to be of some type of added value to you as a practitioner. Sometimes it's a senior leader at a firm like Raymond James. Sometimes it's an attorney talking about transitions. Today I brought on Paul because Paul is an expert in the idea and the process of writing books. And we're going to talk today about why that's important. I wrote a book a few years back, not financial service related, but it was me about paying it forward, having some experiences and knowledge. I want to share it somehow. And Paul has worked with a number of our friends. He currently is writing a couple of books with John Cutton, who is the number one Ameriprise financial advisor, and I think he's at least in the top 50 in the country in terms of practice and practitioners, and he's doing several books with Paul. So today's really just about why write a book, how to write a book, what's the process. If you thought you've always wanted to write a book, like I've always wanted to do that, but I don't know how. Well, now we're going to talk about how. So Paul, why don't you just maybe give some background about your business, which I think is an interesting name, More Clients, More Fun. And so just give the audience some background on who you are and how you got started, and let's just get into what it means to write a book.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Frank. This is my favorite topic, of course, and so I'm excited to be here. I got started in my online marketing agency back in 2016, and it was at that time that really my very first financial advisor client came to me and asked me to work more closely with him. Long story short, I helped him go from a couple $100,000 of commission per year, so he was already successful, to over the course of the next couple of years doing over $2.5 million of commission. And so you can imagine he was super excited. I was excited. It's amazing being part of those transformations for people. But ultimately, his producer group, his carriers, his all these people, they were asking him, "What's your secret sauce? What did you do to accomplish this?" Because it was quite an amazing feat, and he was gracious enough to point the finger in my direction, and so that really opened myself up to the financial advisory space, the life insurance space, et cetera. And ever since then, so ever since 2016, I've just been working with financial advisors. I've worked with close to 500 financial advisors since then. And what I've really honed in on is that financial advisors, by and large, and this is probably for many industries, but financial advisors are unfortunately oftentimes seen as a commodity, right? It's like, what differentiates you? How are your products or services different? How are you different? And so the concept that I've latched on really since 2018 is the concept of authority marketing. And the question behind that is that how do you stand out in a crowded field? How do you elevate your status so that you're not chasing your ideal prospects, but instead they're coming to you? How do you shorten the sales cycle? So instead of getting on these multiple meetings and year-long trying to build trust with someone from, taking so much time. How do you shorten that down to maybe 1 or 2 phone calls so you can take someone who's never heard of you before, maybe lives halfway across the country, but goes from complete stranger to the very first time they show up on your Zoom room, they already know enough about you. They're excited to talk to you and they want to move forward. And so just this concept of authority marketing has fascinated me really since 2018. And the through line to this is that to be an authority and to be really perceived as an authority consistently, the number one way to do that, based on my experience and what I've observed, is to become an author. And over time, ideally, you want to publish multiple books.
I think that, when we talk about our marketing, so I have a marketing company, as I may or may not know, where we do branding and website design and all that stuff. And it's for the same type of reason, right? Because it's someone that you don't know. And I think what advisors need to understand is, and I think more so since 2020, their geography of available clients has changed. It's no longer like your local marketplace, right? Because of COVID and because of people's ability to be more comfortable on a Zoom call, right? If you're watching us on video, I use my hands a lot, so I'm doing like a hand gesture. Be more comfortable on a Zoom call, be more comfortable with not having a financial advisor right down the street from them, right? Maybe they don't ever physically meet them in person, but a Zoom call is sufficient enough. It opens up this world of marketing that you should be doing and branding yourself. And whether it's a website design, proper website, when someone hears of you, they go online and they look you up and they see whether or not you're an authority, as you're saying, right? You're an authority in the business. So that when you do a first phone call with them, they have some knowledge of you. And when someone says, I'm an author, or I'm an author of multiple books, I'm a best-selling author, that's immediate credibility. And I know a lot of successful advisors, and I know John is right there, and he's starting to do a couple of them. But I know dozens of successful advisors, multi-million-dollar producers, and one of the things they're most proud of is, I've written 2 books, 3 books, 4 books on different types of topics, right? Yep. Again, if you're, depending on the firm that you're at, you obviously got to go through compliance. You got to make sure that everything is done on the up and up. I knew of one situation where somebody wrote a book and didn't have it approved, and it did not end well for them. But they were at a wirehouse firm, so sort of demise why. But I think writing a book is really important. So let me just, you talk about this 6-week blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Like the 6-week blueprint and this just the concept of writing a book, I'm probably blowing some people's minds away. Like, oh my God, I don't have time.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. That's going to be years in the making. And I'm not a good writer, right? I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good storyteller. I just know the information. That's how I was, how I started, right? Talk about your 6-week blueprint process.
Yeah. And I'll touch upon first some of the reasons that oftentimes get in people's way. And this is true for me. This is true for everybody. And one, I would say, is that oftentimes when people think about writing a book, the first thing that they have in mind is that to be an author, I have to write this War and Peace 300-page book. I need to go on sabbatical. I need to, start smoking cigars, get a scarf, do all these things. And, can that work? Sure. But typically that's the reason it's on people's bucket lists and don't actually happen. And so the name of my book, which is called the Short Book Formula, is the approach that we help people take. And I'll give you a couple examples. Let me explain a couple ways. So the idea behind the Short Book Formula, conversely, is that the books that we recommend people write typically are roughly 12,000 to 15,000 words. I'll break down more concretely why that's important, is that having a book and being positioned as an author, maybe a best-selling author, is fantastic, but ultimately for the book to fully do its job, you want to get that book into the hands of your ideal prospects, and you actually want them to read the book cover to cover as part of either before they show up in your Zoom room or somehow during that process. And it becomes ultimately what I like to call your salesperson in print. it massively saves you time. Imagine, I know a lot of advisors, they have a presentation and they do it over and over again. And, it's called at bats and all these different things. In my case, and the people that I work with who have books, you still present some, but oftentimes what happens is that someone heard about you on a podcast such as this. They go out, they get a copy of your book, they read it, they schedule a call, they say, okay, I'm interested, tell me more. Well, wait a minute. How much time did I just save, right? And so ultimately, the reason I'm able to do that is because the book, and this goes back to the idea behind the short book formula, is 12,000, 15,000 words. And what that equates to is that someone can reasonably read it from cover to cover in roughly 60 to 90 minutes. And so that's the first point or the starting point for it.
How many pages is that typically?
The way that we format it, it's typically around 100 pages.
So it's not intimidating.
It's not intimidating. Yeah, no, I was literally at the Ameriprise National Conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was giving out copies of John Cutton's new book, amazing event, and I got a bunch of new clients as a result. But the through line was that people were like, yeah, I read it when I was at the pool. Oh, I read it on the plane back. Oh, I read it here. And so it's not just I got his book and it's on my bucket list to read one day. No, they read it. And then they also read my book. Right. And so they become very informed and educated in a very short amount of time.
Right. And yeah, you're trying to get them to buy in to then engage with you on whatever it is you're trying to excel, or whatever it is you're trying to provide, whether it's a service, retirement plan, or whatever it is, right? Doesn't matter.
100%. Yeah, no, it's very focused. So the more specific you can be in terms of really who the book is for, and that's really important, is that the clearer you are on the who, the more powerful it's going to be, the more likely you are to attract the right people to it. And then ultimately, people read books because oftentimes they have a problem. They want to get educated. They're looking for a solution. And so ultimately, just a classic problem solution, but it takes them through a journey. It takes the problem, shows them ways to solve it. It's intentionally not a brochure, but it's also a brochure. I guess it's a brochure in disguise, meaning that you don't want to just to read, hey, we do this, this, and that. It's meant to educate them. It tells them stories. And at the end of the day, if they read it and they don't do business with you, that's okay. We want them to feel that they've learned something and that it was a good use of their time. At the same time, it's ultimately designed for someone who actually has a problem that they want solved. It's meant to be your business card on steroids. Now they know enough about you so that by the end of it, they're that much more likely to feel comfortable and want to reach out to you to see how you can help them actually implement the ideas in the book.
So the 6 week, so you're saying basically the 6 week blueprint am I correct in saying it takes about 6 weeks to do this? Or
that is a very, very smart guess. Yeah. So
assuming that you have a willing and an active,
right.
Fine, right? That they get the stuff to you when they're supposed to get the stuff to you, right? So maybe just talk about that process.
Yeah.
What it's like to engage with you as a
yeah.
I'm going to write a book. Tell me if I'm going to write a book, right? Imagine I'm the client. I'm going to write a book on transitions or whatever. What does that process look like?
Yeah, 100%. Starting point is that we anticipate that our typical client is not a writer. And I think you said it earlier, is that most advisors or many advisors experience, they talk day to day, they tell stories, they have knowledge and experience. And that's exactly what we're looking for. And so the idea behind it is that we meet with them once a week on Zoom for about an hour. And we essentially have them talk out their book. So we have a target, which is 12,000 to 15,000 words. We take them through a process once a week on Zoom. We structure the whole thing so that when they show up, they know exactly what we're going to be talking about, so that during the week, they can reflect upon key stories, ideas, etc. Big question I get is, okay, all in, how much time does this take me? And what I tell people is that generally it's over 6 weeks. You want to spend maybe 1 hour, max 2 hours, just preparing, jotting notes, reflecting, thinking about ideas. And then it's an hour on the call. So we're looking about 2 to 3 hours per week over the course of 6 weeks. And we record all of the information. And then we have a writer on our team who then writes the first draft. And the key there, and this is how I just want to be clear in terms of ghostwriting. So it's not ghostwriting in the sense that you just tell someone, hey, write me a book about, M&A. and they'll go to Google and do some searches. No, I mean, this is your ideas. These are your stories, your experiences, your opinions, your philosophy, your value proposition, all those things that make you uniquely you. We capture all of that, and then we're able to produce a high quality first draft for you that you then have a chance to go through carefully and make any notes. Hey, I want to expand this. I want to change that, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, we want the book to reflect you and your values and your voice extremely well. And so that's where that 6 weeks come in. There's a couple more weeks after that, just in the back and forth in terms of getting the edits and maybe compliance approval, et cetera. But ultimately, it's a 6-week process that we take people through.
So, okay. And then do you help with naming the book? Like, do they have to have a name? What does the book look like?
Yeah. So I have an example right here, and I don't know if you can see it well, but this is a colleague of yours. So I know you know Anton Anderson, and you know Paul Latham by chance?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, and this is another cool way to do it, they co-authored the book.
Okay.
And so one of the cool things to do is to not, you can write yourself, obviously, but you can also co-author it. And the book here, so just to paint some context here, Anton is a financial advisor background. Paul Latham is a CPA background, but together they run a training company helping both advisors and CPAs come together and effectively work together for mutual benefit, right? And so the title here, I love the title. It's The Art of Collaboration When Two Tribes Stop the War. And then they have a subtitle, which is How Advisors and Accountants Form Win-Win Partnerships and Accelerate Business Growth by Leveraging a Virtual Family Office. And so this is really everything that they teach in their training company through webinars, through live events, et cetera. But now it's also in book form. So and they're already very successful, but it takes where they are currently, and it just gives them another tool to be, just to further elevate their thought leadership and to allow a vehicle for people to find them, engage with them, and most likely want to do business with them. But to the question, sometimes people have ideas already about the title. I know in this case they did. So they came up with The Art of Collaboration. Sometimes people don't. What I find is that by the end of the 6 weeks, it becomes pretty apparent, or after the 6 weeks, we know what the book's about, right? Because we've taken all this information, and so I love helping people come up with names. It's one of the gifts I have, and so it's always fun to come up with names, subtitles, et cetera. But ultimately, it's up to the author what title they want to go with, and they have full liberty to choose what they would like.
Sure. Yeah, my book, which you don't see, but I have a book right here in the background. If anyone can see it.
Yeah.
So called Counterpunch: How to Get Off the Mat. How to get off the mat and be the champion of your own story. This is my story. We went through some time, and we obviously I didn't know you at the time. I worked with somebody else, but a very similar process. So I can speak to that in terms of it was much easier than I thought it was going to be. Right.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you just, and I think this has probably been 5 or 10 years since you wrote it, and it's not strictly about your business, but it's more about, I think, who you are.
At all, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But how have you used it as a tool? I mean, I know it's on your desk there. You have it framed. Yeah. How was that? What's been your experience?
It's interesting that you bring that up. So I wrote that book really for people that are maybe going through something in their life. It's really not a business book at all. It's more of a self-help, personal development book, something that I would have liked to have had back years ago when I was going through some stuff. And so to me, it was about paying it forward. I had come through some things, and I wanted to pay those lessons forward. And so we call it Counterpunch because I'm a boxer, and everything I sort of equate everything in my life to boxing and lots of stuff like that. So there's a lot of similarities. And then, so we did the cover and all that good stuff. But the way I use it, especially like when we hire new people, because it's not necessarily, it's really about me and my mindset.
Yeah.
When we hire new people, everyone gets that book.
Yeah.
Because it, in a very concise way, it's not like you said, it's not a big book. It's, it's a couple hundred pages or whatever. Gives people that are going to work for me insight into who I am and how I think. Like, as people say, if you want to know how Frank thinks about life, go read his book. That tells you, right? And so that's how we use it. I send it to clients if I hear that a client is going through a struggle of some sort, right? Whether someone in their family is going through a struggle of some sort. If I know somebody, I send the book out to them. Makes me feel good because I'm helping somebody. And the process was very similar to what you're talking about, right? They you get on these calls just like this, and you talk about, you sort of in your mind, you have ideas. So for me, what I was able to do was have a general topic, right? Like different topics, and then equate it to a boxing term or a boxing scenario, right? Like your cornerman, when the bell rings, an opponent, and all these different things. And so I was able to structure the book that way, because that gave me some guidelines on what to talk about. So when we did those weekly calls, right? Okay, we're going to talk about this for this week, and we did a call just like this, and then it was being recorded, and then they would then put it all together in a chapter, and it would sort of be, then you do some editing and tweak it a little bit, right? And it was really fun, and it really didn't. I can speak to this as my truth. It didn't take as long or it was as hard as I thought it was going to be, right? There was definitely some time where, you print it out and you read the whole thing, you read the draft, right? And you're making checks. I don't want to say it this way, or it's not interpreted the same way. But that's the fun part, right? So I'm not a good writer. So I was a little intimidated at first, and I happened to meet somebody that's in a business group of mine that does this. This was years ago. And they're like, hey, we can do this for you. And it's not, you don't have to be a writer. You don't have to, have great grammar and all that stuff. Like, I'm not a good writer. I'm getting better, but it's been great to have it, and I'm proud of it. And I would tell that, which is why I thought this was an interesting call, because I think that there's a lot of advisors that have a lot of smart things and things to talk about. And I'll say this, and this is really all about, the topic of what you're going to write about. I assume that you'll help people with that as well, right?
100%.
Yeah. So, it's just sort of a question, right? In your word, the clients that you have, are they all business-related books, or are they? How do you help the advisor client come up with their topics? Not topics like chapters, but come up with the book itself.
Before I answer that specifically, let me just reflect back a few things. So, I love what you just shared there. And I think, a couple of things that I was making notes on as you were talking is that, one, it was a fun process, right? And it's like, that's the thing that people don't think, right? They think, writing, grammar, hard.
That'd be awful.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's quite the opposite. Whereas the book is, when people engage with us, the book is the reason they engage with us, but almost to everybody that works with us, one of the intangible benefits is the process. And it's actually having a chance to talk out those ideas and get clarity on those ideas. I mean, oftentimes you talk about these, throughout your life, but just going through that process, it's just a magical process. And also helps people get a lot of clarity on what they want to do in terms of their brand and it's like, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And it really can be helpful in many different ways. Also, I just wanted to comment on the fact that you wrote that, again, I don't know the exact year, but let's say 10 years ago or something like that.
I think it was 2019.
19, okay, so 5 years ago. And I just love the shelf life of a book, right? So you're still using this book as a tool, and you described how so. And I imagine in 5 more years, you'll still be using the book as a tool. And so it's one of those rare marketing things that the ROI can be enormous, because it's not just Facebook ads or, spending money on advertising, something like that, but it's branding, it's positioning, it goes to your clients, it goes to your internal team members. The fastest way to get to know who Frank is and how he thinks is, hey, read the book. And so there's just so many different applications for it. And so, that's just a great example of the power of a book. Now, getting to the question, the topic, for the most part, the clients that we work with, we want them to focus in on something to do with their business that's going to drive, that has a specific audience in mind, and that can drive an immediate result in terms of implementing it in their business. Now, your book, we could do a book like that for someone, but it's probably it's not quite our sweet spot. It's more like, the sweet spot's more like, say, Anton and Paul, who I mentioned before. They work with advisors and CPAs. They want to take all of their knowledge and training. They want to package it up as a book. And so there's a very clear audience, and it's very specifically related to their business.
Sure.
John Cutton, who we talked about, his first book is all about planning for the certainty of uncertainty in retirement, which of course is the name of his podcast. It's the whole theme throughout his company. So it's a tool that we published, and all of his advisors, not just him, because he doesn't even work with retail clients, but his advisors now have this tool that they can use to engage their clients. Same thing, people want to get to know him and the CEO of the company. It's a book that they can learn about his vision, mission, and core values. Again, I think for the most part, we try to keep it as related to the day-to-day business so that we can help them get an immediate ROI on the book. But over time, the beauty of the short,
you have to figure out what is their end game. What are they trying to get accomplished?
What's the end game, right? So that's a very great way to say it. It's, what do you want to do with it? Because then the next question that always comes up is, what are you going to do with the book? And how are you going to monetize it and make money back? And if they're not bringing that question up, which they do, I bring up the question, because what we don't work with typically is just someone who has I'd like to write a book one day and write my memoirs. Yeah. That has its place. That's just not us.
Exactly. Yeah, you can, I think that I would say the other thing, if I'm coaching an advisor on what kind of book to write, it doesn't have to be I'm going to write a book on investing in modern portfolio theory, right? It can be the retirement process. If you focus on foundations and endowment, you can talk about those types of things and why that's important, and the things that and add stories, right? Stories are what sell, right? Stories are what connect people to say, oh, that's similar to me. Like I'll never forget, there's the Who Not How book right there by Dan Sullivan, right? In that book, there's a story. He uses a story, a Merrill Lynch advisor, in terms of how he grew his practice and with the who's and not the how. But of all the stuff in the book that he wrote, right, it's the stories that I remember.
Exactly.
Because it connected me to the process. Right?
And that really, I think, speaks to the need to work with, I'd say, a coach, because oftentimes we are so expert in what we do. And just when you said modern portfolio theory, I mean, immediately I'm starting to yawn a little bit, and I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's an amazing topic. I mean, and the person who's the expert is a very smart person, but who's going to be reading this? Is this going to be a PhD academic type person, or is it going to be his typical client? And so you need to simplify. And what you said is you need to tell stories. Now, assuming that the benefit of that is impactful, how do you say that in simpler terms, but really communicate that through stories, and examples? And that's what we really excel at helping people do, is to get outside of the too technical area, which is, can be boring for the average reader, and get them to really bring the ideas to life in a way that engages the reader where they're at. There's studies that show that some of the best-selling nonfiction books in the world are typically written at about an 8th grade or 9th grade level. And so that doesn't mean that they're dumbed down. It just means that they're written in such a way that your average reader can engage with material and walk away with insights and remember stories and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the comments that I get about my book is that it's easy to read. Right? Exactly. It's easy to read and understand, and I think that the message here, which is important, is because I know a lot of advisors, and I talk to them. They want to talk about how great an investment manager they are, and they start talking about alpha and all this other stuff. Like, dude, I don't care. So if you're listening, that's not the kind of book we're talking about. That's not going to get you what you want. And so, you go through those things. So let's just jump to the, I'm going to pay attention to time here. So they get a book, right? They engage with you. They write this book. You help them with the cover. You help them with what the cover looks like, and makes nice and shiny pictures or whatever it is, right? Now, what do you do with it? How do they then implement a strategy? Like, so I have the book. Now what?
Yeah, perfect question. So there's a range of things that you can do with it, and I'll go through some, and I'll try to use some examples. So one of the cool things is that we'll typically, so we'll do everything that you just said, right? So when they engage us, they'll have a blank sheet of paper, and by the time we're done, they'll have a book typically published on Amazon, and we'll take them through the whole process. They don't need to know any of the technical aspects of that. One of the cool things about Amazon, and the reason we publish it there, is that a 100-page book, which is what ours equate to, the cost of it to print it is as low as you can print a single copy or print on demand, literally a single copy, for around $3 to $4. And with Amazon Prime, and you may already know this, but with Amazon Prime, you can literally print on demand and ship a single book for $3 to $4. Now, think about that in terms of a brochure or anything else you might send a client. I mean, it's just mind-bogglingly inexpensive. So the first thing is, okay, what's the low-hanging fruit? Well, we have a client base, right? So let's engage our client base with the book. Let's send them a copy. John Cutton, who we talked about earlier, he has a massive client base, and he's sending 2 copies of his book and a letter to every one of his clients. 1, he wants to engage his clients. 2, he wants to ask for a referral or an introduction. So that's one of the, I would just call it, organic ways to do it. Another way is just integrate it into everything that you already do. The book makes life easier, whether it's from marketing, whether it's from sales, whether it's from positioning. So an example of how I use my book and how I recommend people do it is that as part of the sales process, if someone shows up on your calendar and they haven't yet read your book, we'll send them a copy of it and ask them to read it before the next meeting. It's amazing how that gets rid of the tire kickers. Tire kickers do not read the book. The people, in just in my own experience, about 80% of the people that initially scheduled with me, and I asked them, "Hey, I'll send you a free copy of my book. Can you read it before the next meeting?" 80% say yes, and then when we show up, they already know all my best arguments, all my framing, all my stuff, and so the next meeting becomes incredibly easy. And so again, it's just a massive time saver. It helps you increase your conversions while saving you a tremendous amount of time. That's some of the low-hanging fruit. The next thing I'd say is speaking. Now, if you're already doing speaking, have the book available at your events. I'll be speaking next, or actually this month in San Diego at the Elite Growth Academy, and I'm taking 50 copies of my book because for anyone that I'm talking to that seems interested, I want to give them a copy of my book. Now, if you want to get into some advertising and spending some dollars behind it, what I've found is that one of the best ways to get the word out about who you are and your message, which is in the book, is guest podcasting. What I'm doing right here. It's, how do you, in today's world, guest podcasting is one of the best ways to create awareness with a specific target audience about who you are and what you do. I think speaking in person is probably still number 1, but guest podcasting is probably number 2 in my book. I mean, I know just before the call started, you and I were talking a little bit about just podcasting in general. And I mean, I'll let you share if you want to, but just, I saw the video of you and John Cutton. I wasn't at the event, but, how are you maximizing just that awareness of podcasting?
It's all about the connection to give you something to talk about. We'll do a podcast. So with John in particular, we had a conference and we were recording a podcast. At the same time, we went live on Instagram. So we're able to get reach viewers there. He's got his book ready to go. It gives you another, like you said, it gives you another, I'll say a hook, but gives you something to offer, right? The same thing with podcasting. If you're doing podcasts, you can send those out to we have our clients, if they're looking for more information, my consultants will say, oh, well, I'll send you a podcast that we did with Scott Curtis from Raymond James, if you're considering Raymond James, and we send that out. So it's the
Yep.
same type of thing that you would do with a book, right?
It's super similar, and I'm a big believer in both books and podcasting, both guesting and hosting. But
Yep.
I would distinguish it this way. And I was watching one of your podcasts, I think last night, just in preparation for today, and you made the comments like, "Well, thank you for watching, but of course you should have been watching all of my podcasts. I should already know who my guest is, right?"
Right.
And while we believe that, the reality is that most people pick up on a podcast here or there, and so the book is really that ultimate podcast packaged up in a material. So yes, to your point, you can, if you're talking to someone from Raymond James and you have a podcast that specifically talks about an issue that relates to them, by all means, sending them that podcast is a powerful way to do it, because they get that education in advance about how you're relevant and how you've helped them. I would recommend people, especially people that do podcasts, tie in the book. I mean, you can have your own commercials, right? So like every episode, it's like, hey, get a copy of my book, go to my website. And so just the more synergistically you're using these tools, and I find that speaking plus a book, it's one of those 1 + 1 = 3 things.
Right.
The synergy between them is just massive. So I mean, again, not to be presumptuous here, but for someone like yourself who has, a big audience and a podcast, tying in a book as a next step for people, just takes it where it's very actionable for people to do something with it.
Yeah, sure. And then you have it on your website. So with our branding company, our marketing company called Elite Marketing Concepts, we try to get advisors to do videos, do podcasts of some sort, videos, we call them whatever, videos, and get them on and have an embedded page on their website. If you're writing a book, you can also have the book on your website. And again, it goes to the authority marketing. If you meet a prospect, I use this example all the time of, I was at a golf event the other day, not playing golf or anything like that. It was just like a coaching thing. And then we went and talked about marketing. If you're a golfer and you go up to the first tee box and you meet somebody, and you don't really want to talk about business the whole time, you want to play golf and enjoy the relationship. But if you say to them, listen, why don't you go check out my website on there? I also wrote a book that's on there. You can read that and check out my podcast. Like, just give them the link to go to your website, have all that information on there. So number one, you got to have a good looking website to make sure that you look credible, right? But if you have a podcast and a book on there, in their mind, you're an immediate authority in the business. You don't have to sell yourself anymore because you have a book and you have a podcast.
And again, just going back to the example of, preparing for today's call, what did I do? I Googled you. Right. I've watched some of your content obviously over time because, we're part of some similar groups, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. And so I Googled you, I watched some of your podcasts. I got this information in advance of meeting with someone. I find in addition to the website, which is absolutely the case, what's the first thing that people do nowadays when they're going to meet someone? Well, they Google them. Right. They Google their name. So what shows up? And I heard you talking about this with someone recently, is that what do you want to show up, right? And there's oftentimes in branding, there's a disconnect between what you talk about with people in, day to day in person and what shows up when you Google them. Now, the first thing you want to have is a well done website, because that's typically the first place that people go.
Right.
But the more, the first page of Google, the more results that you have that are, I would call authority driven, meaning that in addition to your website, what podcasts have you been on? What books have you written? Who's been on your podcast? I mean, all these things go into helping someone form an impression in advance of ever meeting. I mean, again, I'll give you a specific example. One thing I didn't know about you, which I learned the other day, was that you have like 200,000 Instagram followers. Yeah. I'm just blown away. I'm like, wow. Yeah. And I mean, but it's all these things that it's like, are impressive, right? And so, especially, and just kind of coming back, is that, for your, I think we're all salespeople, we're all in the business of selling our wares but how do we want to be seen in the world? Do we want to be seen as that typical salesperson, hey, sign up, buy my stuff, whatever? Or do you want to be seen as that authority, that thought leader, that educator that people feel lucky to have a chance, A, to talk to, and B, to work with, and then C, the more you do a good job of positioning yourself, well, guess what? Your clients start seeing you as kind of a mini celebrity And what happens there? Word of mouth. They start telling people, yeah, I'm working with Frank LaRosa. Ooh, I need to tell I need to tell people about this. I mean, that's the best marketing you can have. And so what I like to say, just as a through line, is that when it comes to marketing, authority is the priority. Authority is the priority. So in everything that you do, from your website to your speaking to your content to your sales, how are you elevating your authority positioning, and how are you then communicating that through everything that you do, from day-to-day conversations to how you appear online?
I wrote that down. Authority is the priority.
Authority is the priority. And by the way, I mean, and you do a fantastic job of this. I mean, through your Advisor Talk podcast, you do an extremely good job. I've been very impressed in just, how you brand it and everything that you do. So, I mean, if you haven't thought of that specific concept, you definitely are living it already.
Yeah, sort of probably by accident. It's always, you get to a place and sometimes you don't know how you got there, but
right, exactly.
So let me just show, not that, again, I'm sure that I don't want to talk about price here, but price is an issue in the absence of value, but can you just give us an idea of what the cost is? Again, not to give it specific, like, hey, this is what you said on the podcast. Generally speaking, what does it cost to write a book? And then you said $3 or $4 or whatever it is to produce the book a bit. So assume you're selling the book for, I think I was selling mine for, when you first get them out, for a low rate to get them out, just to, right? So can you give us an idea of what it costs to do this? What's this project going to cost?
Yeah. So we have 3 different packages for people. And just to paint a little bit of context, there's a wide range of pricing out there. And so on the one hand, you have companies like, Forbes Books as an example, and I have people that I've worked with from their other companies, they'll charge $100,000 plus, right? So that's like on the one extreme. And then on the other extreme, you have, Fiverr, and maybe we'll say, $5,000. So you got this $5,000 to $100,000 range, I would say. Our costs we have 3 different packages, and we meet with people and we talk about what works best, but generally it's between $9,000 to $18,000, depending on the specifics. And we make this, we try to make this affordable in the sense that we, payments and everything, so that so it's easy to invest in. But at the end of the day, our goal is to help people make the money back almost as soon as they publish the book, because there's so many different ways to use it. And if you think about, okay, my typical client's worth, whatever it is, $10,000. Well, 5 years later, when you now have 300 new clients as a result of this book, what's your ROI? And so it can be, as long as you're thinking not just about writing the book, publishing it, and then saying, hey, mom, can you read my book? But you're actually thinking ahead and saying, okay, how do I plan to use this book for everything that we talked about today? The ROI is astronomical. This is why part of our business model is to start with one book with someone, and that's usually a daunting task. But over time, it's like, yeah, I want to write a book, like John Cunnan again. I want to write a book about, to my retail clients, one for advisors, one about M&A, one about this, one about that.
I came up with 2 books just on our call. Literally came up with 2 books.
And the proof is in the pudding, right? Because we start with one, but my experience and most of my clients' experience is that the ROI is astronomical. The process is surprisingly fun, that people come back over and over again to write more and more books. And so to your point, price is only an issue in the absence of value. When you write a book, it's the ultimate piece of marketing collateral in my experience.
Okay. Awesome. So if somebody's interested in doing this, and they want to get in touch with you, how do they start that? How do they, contact you?
Yep.
And how do they start that process?
Very simple. So just go to my website. It's www.theshortbookformula.com. There you can get a complimentary copy of my audiobook, which I encourage people to check out. And also my calendar information is there. So if you've listened to this and you want to schedule a call, feel free to schedule a call, and we'll see if this process is a good fit for you.
Awesome. We'll have the link in the content of the post.
Awesome.
So that's awesome. So the shortbookformula.com, which is tremendous. Don't forget, obviously, to check out my Instagram account, which is frankLaRosa.elite.
I just followed. I'm following now. You have 200,001 followers now.
We have, I think I'm looking at right now, we have 265,000 followers. Hoorah.
And one, 265 and one.
Right? I think maybe you put me over from 264 to 265, right? But check that out. Obviously, you can follow Paul on LinkedIn, and obviously you also have a newsletter that they can sign up for, which is great. And my thing would be, maybe you're not sure if you want to write a book. Just reach out to Paul and have a conversation. Again, it's not as hard as you think. It's actually. Listen, I'll say this too. When I was going through the exercise of writing the book, I was actually energized about some of the stuff that I was talking about, right? And while I was writing the book and the certain chapters about certain things, I was actually, it was reminding me of certain accomplishments, but certain things that I was able to achieve that I then used in real time with other people.
Yep.
Right? So it was a very cathartic type of thing. And, again, the topics, in my opinion, can be business related, but you can bring the personal side in. I actually think you should bring the personal side in, because, as your point is, clients want to do business with people that they like.
Yep.
Right? You're all smart. If you're listening to this podcast, you're really smart because you're listening to the podcast, right? So congratulations. But for the most part, if you've been in the business for more than a cup of coffee, you're a smart individual. So everybody's smart, right? But clients want to do business with people that they like, with people that they connect with. And the best way to do that is get them to understand who you are as an individual. And so when you talk about a business book, you have to sort of get into that a little bit about who you are as a person, if that's your target audience.
Yeah, and I don't think I was as clear as I could have been before. So 100%. So in addition to simplifying concepts and telling stories, you 100% want to inject it with you, because at the end of the day, this is about personal branding, and you want the reader to feel that they have a relationship with you. And the more stories that you tell them about you that are relevant to the topic, the more that's going to happen. I'll give you a real quick example. John Cutt, in his book, Planning for the Certainty of Uncertainty Retirement, chapter 1 really just is his background. And I don't know if you've heard this story, and maybe you have, but his parents, he talks about this in the book. His parents, he's this massively successful today financial advisor. I think you said top 50 in the nation, number 1 at Ameriprise. Chapter 1, my parents went bankrupt. Right. I mean, how is that for instantly creating authenticity, right? To your point, boxing. I mean, I haven't yet had the chance to read the book, although I'm going to order it. And I mean, if anything, if I was working with you, probably the only thing I would have done maybe differently was I would take the theme of boxing, which I love, and all the concepts, and really paint the picture around that about who you are. And if you didn't do this, I would have maybe just had a little bit more focused on a specific piece of your business that you're trying to do. But I would take all the themes that you're doing and wrap those around them, because that makes that topic that much more interesting.
Right. Yeah. So again, this is, mine was a little bit different. And so the next couple of books that I think about will be business specific, right?
Yep.
That book was really more personal development and not really related to business. Like no one's going to read that book and go, "Oh, I'm going to work with Frank to transition my practice from Merrill Lynch to," I'm just saying Merrill Lynch, but you know what I mean?
No.
Right?
Well, yes and no, because if you insert that as part of your process, which it sounds like you do, chances are, if they're comparing you to 2 other people and they read your book and they relate to you,
right?
Well,
that's true.
Now you have a leg up.
Right. That's true. Right. So, and again, that is so. I think that's why this whole process is exciting, because you can really do things that you never thought you'd be able to do, and this process that you implement has made it very easy for people to write a book. So anyway, with that said, Paul, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. This was awesome. I'm sure we have listeners' minds going. And, if you're listening to this in the car, thinking about what kind of book you want to write, just, there is really nothing that you can't, other than, we're not going to help you write your memoirs. But, things about your business. If you've been in the business for 25, 30 years, you have stories, right? You have scenarios. You've been through things. You've understood what it was like going through September 11th. Well, you understood when the market shut down, different, market crises, the tech bubbles. There are things that that if you put in a book can be useful to people. So it's sort of your obligation to pay it forward, is my opinion. And so with that said, Paul, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. My listeners, thanks for listening. Don't forget, you go to the shortbookformula.com and schedule an appointment with Paul and just have a conversation and see where it goes. If you want to have a conversation with me about anything else, you can obviously go to franklarosa.elite on my Instagram account. You can shoot me a message on LinkedIn. You can go to my website, which is eliteconsultingpartners.com, where we have a lot of information. We have tons of podcasts that I've done over the last couple of years. Over, I don't know, I think we're north of 200 podcasts at this point. I have lost count. But I hope this helped. I hope this was informative, and hope that you engage with Paul and you get going on writing a book and help it bring new clients in. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcasts.